Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'll be playing the Dwarves, and I'm going to be facing off against, let's see over here, I think it's the Warriors of Chaos with all their chariots and other fun business coming my way, so hopefully you guys will enjoy this cast here. So as far as my army goes, I have a front line of the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. These guys are excellent. They do fire damage. If you are playing multiplayer, it will synergize quite well with Kindle Flame. But also, they have pretty good stats across the board. 50 melee defense, 28 weapon strength, 39 melee attack, which is pretty darn high. And considering in a multitude of different dwarf builds, that can be buffed with High King Thorgrim, other units like that. These guys can become pretty darn good for how much you're paying. I have Longbeards here and then Longbeards here. In the wings, I also have two groups of Dwarf Warriors, so these guys are kind of like my periphery fodder. So the front line usually is going to be engaged with, their front line, so I like to have my heavier troops there. And then in the wings, you're going to get the less favorable matchups. You're going to get, Cav coming in, you're going to get chariots, you're going to get enemy lords, manticores trying to clip your wings, all those type of things. So I usually just put the Dwarf Warriors there, and they do have pretty good defensive stats with 80 armor, and they do have charge defense against large foes, so you don't really need to invest the more expensive infantry in the wings, in my opinion, but again, that's just my opinion there. So I do have Longbeards here, the Grumbling Guard here, and then I have the Peak Gate Guard here. So kind of my ideology with this army was I didn't want to have any soft spots. I wanted this to be a very tough army to kind of pick away at, and one that I could just march right down the pipe. I didn't have any cannons or anything in the back that I had to allocate resources to protect, and the only range unit I have is these Thunders. And in retrospect, I kind of wish I hadn't brought them, because with all these chariots and flying units, it's definitely going to be hard to protect those guys. So I do have a group of Thunders here, some more Dwarf Warriors here, a Thane here, and then of course you guys saw I do have the Rune Lord and two additional Runesmiths. So definitely going to be a lot of Rune of Wrath and Runin going on, guys. So as far as my opponent's army goes, he has a pretty scary army. He's got Chaos Marauders down here with great weapons, pretty cheap armor-piercing option against the Dwarves. They do have 27 weapon strength, and they do have 35 move speed, which a lot of people don't take into account. They are quite fast, so they can circumvent your defenses and are, a fairly mobile threat. And then he actually has a group of Chosen with great weapons here, so pretty darn strong unit. I definitely need to make sure to get my Peak Gate Guard on these guys. And then he has Chaos Marauders here, here, and here. So a very cheap, relatively speaking, cheap infantry corps aside from the Chosen. He does have a Hell Cannon, and when you do bring units like Hell Cannons and Gorby's Chariots, you're definitely going to cut into the quality of your infantry corps. So hopefully he will be able to generate some value with this Hell Cannon as well as these Chariots. He has a Feral Manticore here. He actually has a Chaos Lord on the ground. And again, he did spend a ton of money on these kind of accessories here. So, it's going to cut into the resources of his other things like his Chaos Sword being able to have a mount there. And it looks like some more Chaos Marauders here. He's got two Gorby's Chariots, some Chaos Knights with Lances, which are definitely scary. They have a charge bonus of 80 and 42 weapon strength. So even though the Dwarves are fairly heavily armored, these guys coming into the back of a group of Dwarf Warriors or on my Thunders is going to be really hard to deal with. He also has an Exalted Hero here, and that is about it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, guys. So I am taking the Hell Cannon fire, unfortunately. I'm not sure if he was manually aiming it. I think he actually manually aimed the first shot, made pretty good contact with my Longbeards here, and then started manually aiming again. So definitely very scary when that happens, and it's going to come right into these Grumbling Guard here, which is really tough. These are a very expensive unit, but at the same time, I was just grateful that he wasn't targeting my Peak Gate Guard. I don't think he noticed them quite yet, so I was pretty happy about that. But still, I'm taking all that Hell Cannon fire, but still, the Hell Cannon itself costs, what is it, 1,200, I believe? It's doing so much damage. So in order to pay for itself over the course of the battle, it really needs to do a ton of damage. It needs to kill essentially two groups of Longbeards in total to really pay for itself. So if I'm able to kind of mitigate that by just charging right into this infantry line and kind of cluttering up with his troops so he doesn't have as good of a targeting system, I should be okay. But still, he's doing a ton of damage. He's already done a good 15% HP damage on this group here. Another maybe, almost half the HP of this group. Those are the Grumbling Guard. Those are one of my more elite infantry. So definitely very well played by my opponent. He's clearly very, very on top of that if he is manually aiming it. Otherwise, he's just, getting somewhat lucky in regards to the targeting there, but he's still doing really, really well. So he does have this scary mobile force coming around the wings here. He has two Gorby's Chariots, so this is going to be a lot to deal with. Chariots are a nightmare for the Dwarves, but with the Rune of Wrath and Rune, it helps a little bit. So I do posture up these Thunders, but they did take a Hell Cannon shot, which kind of disrupted their firing formation, but they're going to take some pot shots here at this Gorby's Chariot, which is pretty good. Thunders, they have pretty high armor too. Yeah, they have 100 armor, so I do use a Rune of Wrath and Rune. I start shooting it with my Thunders, and I really wanted to wear those things down because I knew those were one of the biggest issues I was going to have this game. So in the front line, you can see the Chosen are engaging with the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, so they're pretty sturdy. They should be able to tank it. At the same time, I do pull the Peak Gate Guard and my other armor-piercing group of Longbeards here to kind of engage with these guys. So once they get their armor sundered by the Peak Gate Guard, these other troops, even the lower-tier infantry, should have a bit of a better time against them. But the Peak Gate Guard are just absolute monsters. So getting them on the wings of these Chosen, they're going to be able to kind of eat through them this way, which is a pretty good situation. You can see they're starting to take some losses. Let's go ahead and take a look. So their armor is down to 88. So they actually have about as much armor as a group of Dwarf Warriors now, which is really, really solid. So definitely a big fan of these guys, if you can get them in without getting punished. So, and Chaos doesn't really have like scary artillery, so they're not able to punish you too bad before you get there. I mean, they do have a scary artillery, but it's not as accurate. So, it's not always going to do devastating damage to your valuable units. But he does get some Gorby's Chariots in here. Is doing pretty good. And, I have been spamming the Rune of Wrath and Rune on these Chaos Knights here, and it was going pretty well because the Master Rune of Wrath and Rune is really, really good. But unfortunately, my Rune Lord, I'd left him back with some Dwarf Warriors, my Thunders, and I figured, hey, these guys can hold the line against, his harass back here, but that was not the case at all. Those Lances ran right through, and then he was also able to land on my Thunders and just punish them pretty badly. But thankfully, the Rune Lord himself is pretty sturdy. He has 120 armor, pretty high leadership, so I'm just going to march him back to the front line. He should be fine. But the Gorby's Chariots are starting to get worn down through the Rune of Wrath and Rune attrition. Even though it doesn't do the most damage to them, it's still enough, and it's just wearing them down. You kind of just have to punish them every time they come in. If you let them come in and out without taking any damage, you're simply just going to lose the game. But you can see he's trying to focus my Runesmith here, but that rune is just so strong. You can look at the HP damage it's doing here, and it's just cutting those guys down. That was the last tick there, so you guys didn't get a chance to see that, but it is doing a ton of damage. And also in the front line, my infantry are holding up pretty well. My opponent did invest in like a lot of harass and other things like that, and he does still have a very healthy Gorby's Chariot over here, which is doing really well against my troops. You can see the Grumbling Guard here continuing to take that Hell Cannon fire. These Longbeards here are taking a beating as well. And this Chariot's in really good health, so that's going to be an issue for me to take care of, as it is breaking this entire flank over here. So very, very tough situation. Over here, this Runesmith was kind of assigned to my contingent back here to help out, but unfortunately the rest of those Dwarf Warriors got run over by Chariots, and they kind of got run down by the Manticore. So I should have left more forces back to defend the Thunders, I think, in retrospect, or I should have just not brought the Thunders. But again, hindsight is always 20/20. So this Runesmith's putting up a pretty good fight against these Chaos Marauders. He is spamming the Rune of Wrath and Rune every chance he gets, but this is a bad trade for him. These guys are just, they cost almost nothing, and this Runesmith is somewhat expensive, so definitely not the best situation for me. But he does have his Chaos Lord in here, and these Chariots did kind of get trapped a little bit, and the Rune Lord is able to use his various buffs to kind of make this little pocket of resistance I have here pretty good. And he does get Rune of Wrath and Rune. That's actually one of my smaller Runesmiths, but let's go ahead and take a look if we can see the HP deck. So it does do a little bit of damage. It's definitely not negligible. But still, the fight is very pitched in here. You can see the Chariots, so have kind of gotten locked down a little bit. Sometimes that can happen, but my opponent is wisely going to pull out that Gorby's. Is that enough? I think they're still in good health. Let's go ahead and take a look. Now, these ones are actually pretty beat up, but they still do have 3 models, so they can still definitely do some damage. And this darn Hell Cannon back here is still firing. Let's go ahead and see where it's going to fire. I think he was just firing into this blob here, which would actually not be a bad idea, considering he just has like some low-tier infantry here, and I have a lot of resources invested here. I have the Peak Gate Guard, who are pretty worn down. They're down to 10 models, so you can see this is just a grudging, brutal fight in the trenches, and there's still a few Chosen left. And Chosen, even though the Peak Gate Guard can probably beat them in a head-to-head, Chosen are still, they hit like trucks, so you can never discredit them, and they're just monsters. So they're continuing to work on my Dwarf Warriors here, and you can see they're definitely laying the smackdown. My opponent did bring his Manticore back from kind of chasing off my Thunders back there, so very well played there. The Manticore is definitely laying the smackdown, so let's go ahead and take a look at what's left here. So you can see the Rune of Wrath and Rune here. It's doing a little bit of damage. Definitely very useful. One of the biggest weaknesses of the Dwarves, in my opinion, is their ability to kind of retaliate from harass. So what I mean by that is when people come in and harass them with either ranged harass, cav, missile units, it will generally favor the opponent because you don't have the mobility to match that harass. But I think by spamming Runesmiths and Rune Lords, you can kind of punish them for coming in, which is really nice. So for example, if they come in with Pegasus Knights or Empire Knights or Demogryphs, whatever it is, you can essentially trade the damage they're giving you by using like a Master Rune of Wrath and Rune on them, which is really nice. You can see I actually accidentally used the Master one on these Chaos Marauders here, and it will just simply punish them and run them off the battlefield. And it seems like it lasts a long time, but I think it lasts the same amount of time, but it's very, very cool ability. So those guys are shattered. He does have the Chaos Lord here, but the Dwarves their leadership is so awesome. I mean, there's 6 models left here. Here there's 11. The Peak Gate Guard have 4, and they're still confident despite all that, which is great. So granted, they're in a favorable matchup here. They're not being punished or anything, so their leadership isn't going to tank, but God, the Dwarf leadership is just so freaking awesome. And that Runesmith over here, he was able to champ it out and actually take care of those Marauders. So you can see him marching all triumphantly back to the battle. Definitely got some more stories to tell from that. And he's got some of those Dwarf Warriors from the initial engagement back there who did return to help him out. So very, very cool situation. So my opponent does have this darn Hell Cannon left, and you can see the Chaos Dwarves are going fisticuffs with their brethren here, and it's definitely not going to be a good situation for these guys. That guy just got headbutted into the Shadow Realm there, so things are going pretty well. But man, I can't tell you guys how many Dwarf games I've had where they had a Hell Cannon in the back, and like it was a really close battle, and I had like a few troops left, but was able to win the main engagement. And then they simply run their Dwarf Warriors or their Chaos Dwarf Cannon crew around the map and actually get a draw. It's really, really obnoxious, but thankfully this guy didn't do that. So yeah, what they do essentially is they drop the Hell Cannon and they just start running into the corner of the map, or they hide behind a hill or in the trees, and you can't find them, and then you simply get a draw. So it's a really annoying thing because, again, the dwarves, they don't have the mobility, and usually your cannons and other ranged weapons are going to be dead by that point in the game, so it's pretty ridiculous, but definitely funny. So I guess you can't hate on people too much for it, but darn, it was definitely a good game there, a lot of fun. So again, you know, just the main principle of this game is, you know, you guys saw there was a ton of mobile harass, and having the Rune of Wrath and Rune kind of goon squad here is really good at punishing that harass, or at least, you know, trading evenly, which is really, really important. So you guys saw, I mean, one Master Rune of Wrath and Rune on these Chaos Knights brought them down to like 70-60% or something. And then, you know, just having a follow-up one from a regular Runesmith is almost enough to just take that unit offline. My opponent did a great job punishing my Thunders. He definitely outplayed me and allocated his resources a lot better in that respect. I thought a group of Dwarf Warriors and, you know, my Lord would be able to handle it, but no, he definitely did very well there. And I'm not sure if he was manually aiming his Hell Cannon, but I think he was in the beginning. He was very accurate and definitely did a good job punishing my Grumbling Guard. And as you can see, they didn't rack up a lot of kills that matchup. Granted, he didn't have a lot of heavily armored targets for them. But anyways, good game to my opponent, Gerard. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder. And I hope you guys enjoyed that Dwarf cast. Have an excellent night and take care.